Well, let me begin. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Martin Sanchez-Jankowski, and I'm a professor of sociology here at University of California, Berkeley, and also the director of the Institute for the Study of Societal Issues, where both of these prizes are housed. I'd like to welcome all of you who are attending to the Kids First David L. Kirp Prize and the Foundations for Change, the Thomas I. Yamashita Prize award ceremony. I'd like to thank a number of people before we get started for what will be this event. First, the Yamashita family for endowing the Yamashita for the Foundations for Change Prize. And secondly, David Kirp for endowing the Kids First Prize. And to Christine Trust and Deborah Lustig, who organized the selection process as well as the organizing of this award ceremony. Before we begin, I'd like to have everyone check their cell phones to make sure that they're on silence, please. And while everybody is doing that, I'd just like to review the order of events for this afternoon. First, the Foundations for Change Prize and Honorable Mention will be awarded. Next, the Kids First David L. Kirp Prize will be awarded, after which our guest speaker, Pedro Noguera, will offer some keynote address comments, as well as a wine and a cheese reception that will follow, and I do hope that everybody will stay for the wine and cheese party that follows this event. Let me introduce the first prize that will be awarded today, and that's the Foundations for Change Thomas I. Yamashita Prize. And to do so, I'd like to introduce Bob Yamashita, son of Thomas I. Yamashita, an associate professor of science and society studies at Cal State University, San Marcos, who will make a few comments on the prize itself and introduce the subsequent speakers. Bob?
Thanks, Martine. I'd like to welcome everybody here, and I'm supposed to say a quick few words about the prize, and I have a timer in front of me who will tell me when. Because I'm an academic, we can talk for 45 minutes. Well, the Yamashita Prize was actually envisioned in conjunction with Rachel Moran, who, former director of the Institute, was really trying to create a vision of what the prize would actually represent, and we had, through long conversations about my dad, we actually came up with this notion that, how many of you have seen the Hong Kong waterfront pictures of Hong Kong? Okay, all of the classic glass towers. My dad was there for 30 years. He did none of those. Okay, but all of the work he did allowed those towers to be built, and he got his degree at Berkeley in engineering, and his vision was foundations. And so if you look at the number of projects which he actually worked on when he was in the Far East, especially in Hong Kong, he built a lot of the core infrastructure which allowed Hong Kong to become Hong Kong and eventually become one of the tigers. Okay, so that was the key, framework. And when we were thinking about the problem of change, a lot of times we think we celebrate the stars. We forget that there's a lot of people who are doing a lot of the grunt work and don't get recognized. And so part of it was really trying to envision a prize which could actually recognize those people. Okay, and because usually you have the stars and you have the workers, and oftentimes there's a gap. And so we're trying to recognize the people on the ground who are doing some really interesting work. And so that was the basis of this prize. I'm under a minute, so we'll just, since we're ahead of the game, so it gives you an extra minute, Pedro. Okay, so we'll first like to call up David Pearson to introduce Nicola, McClung, and Arturo Cortéz, who were the winners of this year's prize.
Hi there, I am David Pearson. I'm a faculty member in the Graduate School of Education here on the UC Berkeley campus. And I'm thrilled to be here to introduce this year's recipients of the Foundations for Change, Thomas I. Yamashita Prize, Arturo Cortéz, and Nicola McClung. It was a true honor to be a part of the nomination process for Arturo and Nicola as founding members of the Social Justice Press. During the past 3 years as a board member of their project, I and my fellow board member and my fellow nominator, who's here, Jose Lizarraga, have been in awe of the work that they have done to demonstrate their commitment to social justice, to amplify the voices of those who are often silenced in our society, and in the process to provide an opportunity for teachers to be a part of that amplification process. In their book project, kindergarten through 10th grade students in the Section 8 Prince Hall Thomas Paine Housing Complex in the Western Addition in San Francisco work with pre-service teachers at the University of San Francisco to author original nonfiction books. To date, they have published close to 60 of these books by youth, and those books have been distributed and read to youngsters across San Francisco and beyond. Through their powerful work, Arturo and Nicola have not only provided a venue for marginalized children and youth to raise those voices, but they also to develop the necessary literacy skills that allow them, as Freire and Macedo have taught us, to read the word and the world, while at the same time providing relevant and relatable books for young children and closing the cultural distance between students and teachers in urban schools, what our colleagues are now calling not only culturally relevant but culturally sustaining pedagogy. Nicola and Arturo's individual backgrounds have brought to fruition an exciting project that utilizes each of their unique skills and strengths. Nicola, who's an assistant professor of learning and instruction at University of San Francisco, brings her interest in critical literacy and multiliteracies that develop during early childhood, while Arturo brings a lens that examines how broader policy narratives influence literacy and instruction and authorship in our society. I, along with my fellow board members, have seen that Nicola and Arturo are innovative, creative, and energetic thinkers who understand the need to transform the theories and the research, most of which they learned here at Berkeley, into action that makes a difference in classrooms and communities and in the lives of children. They both spent their time at Berkeley trying to understand the agency of young people. Each aspect of the project in which they're engaged sheds new light on our understanding of how young people experience their worlds and come to be agentive human beings who have a sense that they matter and that they can make things happen. Their commitment to addressing issues of equity for people of all marginalized groups is manifest across the multiple platforms in which they engage: art, performance, teaching, and their own research. The XJP begins with this foundation in mind and is committed to finding ways for students to share their own narratives and to address issues in their communities in ways that feel authentic to them. To this end, they work with elementary-age children from non-dominant backgrounds to help each find his or her own story, and then to help publish their works through the press, and then to see to it that those books are actually read by other youth in the San Francisco area. It is undoubtable from our perspective that XJP directly affects social change for its community partner Prince Hall, and broadly influences teacher education at UCSF and beyond. After the creation of the first set of books in 2014, the director of Prince Hall reported that her students began to see themselves as writers and spent the year developing comic books of all sorts. Another child met the mayor of his grandfather's town and received local recognition for producing the book about that venue. Prince Hall has been able to use the books to promote their program to donors and raise funds for their organization. Additionally, because the books are supported by teachers in training, teachers develop an understanding of culturally responsive and sustaining pedagogies when they are working with their student authors. Teachers begin to see the multiple resources and the funds of knowledge that students bring to the literacy process, which is equally important if the students and teachers come from different backgrounds, as often they do in our teacher education programs. Arturo and Nicola have gathered a diverse array of established and emerging scholars to advise them in this important and impactful project. We have known them both in various capacities as advisors, as advisees, as peers, and as colleagues. And we have been witness to their passion for students and their success in finding ways to bridge theory and practice. Therefore, we are honored to join the project as advisory board members. Through this experience, we have seen how their passion and talent have extended into a project that is making a significant difference in children's lives. In summary, through their work with XJP, Arturo and Nicola embody the values of the Yamashita Prize and seek to and the prize seeks to recognize a strong desire to bring their many talents to bear on scholarship and practice, a commitment to helping to transform the lives of those who are historically marginalized in our society. I, along with my fellow board members, and with a special shout out to my Jose Lizarraga, my fellow nominator, we're honored to be here to celebrate Arturo and Nicola and the Xochitl Justice Press. Arturo and Nicola, you bring pride and honor to your community, your profession, and to your alma mater. Would you please come forward to accept your prize?
Congratulations.
Would you like me to hold this for you? Will you?
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for recognizing us and allowing us to share our work at Xochitl Justice Press, which we call XJP. And I'm going to begin by explaining some of the background that led me to this project and describe what we do before handing it over to my co-founder, Arturo Cortéz. Most children are introduced to reading through picture books, which blend images and text to tell a story. However, as a whole, children's books systematically omit particular groups of children and their families and elevate others. For example, the overwhelming focus of books about the ins and outs of childhood that include themes of family in the U.S. is on cohabitating two-parent families that are white, able-bodied, and heterosexual, a pattern that is replicated across books about humans and animals alike. Although some important alternatives exist, the constant repetition of dominant narratives over time marginalizes the reader whose life is at odds with this portrayal of a proper childhood. Therefore, books reflect, position, and produce the legitimacy or illegitimacy of the child's self, relationships, and family. XJP began to equip children and youth and their teachers with tools to negotiate, critique, and create their textual and discursive environments. So, XJP's first book is my example book called Scientists, in which this book is about basic science research, in which the scientist depicted is Black and trans. My daughter, who's seen over there on the right, and sees herself in this book and imagines that the typical scientist is one that defies commonplace expectations and stereotypes. As a result, she identifies as a scientist. Using scientists as an example, we began to work with authors to write nonfiction children's books that represent non-dominant cultures, languages, and perspectives. In doing so, readers and writers are able to see lives that are familiar to them in print, reinforce multiple and valid non-dominant identities and relationships, and reimagine their futures. Notably, this year was really exciting because our authors responded to this social change prompt. So these guys wrote about my superpower, which was to plant flowers in their neighborhood for their community. Another example is this book called Water for the Win, in which twins Jason and Justice Pickett explore the sugar content in their favorite drinks, using evidence to construct an argument aimed at their community to drink water instead of soda. We also have books by adults. And in this slide, we attempt to display XJP's role in connecting the academy to the community. On the top left, we have UC Berkeley, where we met and have received ongoing mentoring and inspiration from scholars such as David Pearson and Laura Straponi. There's XJP. At the bottom is University of San Francisco, where we both work, and we've worked together to work with master's students and doctoral students, where we conduct community partnerships with the Prince Hall Computer Learning Center in the Western Addition. One of our doctoral students has extended the project to East Palo Alto, and community members come to speak in our classes about culturally sustaining pedagogy. And finally, once our authors are published, they do author readings and signings to kindergarten and first graders in their community. Additionally, right now we're working on a book by Leroy Moore, who's an activist. The book is called Black Disabled Art History 101, which is a groundbreaking book about disability culture that we hope to get into schools in the Bay Area and beyond. Our focus on education, we draw from the work of David Pearson, Lucan Freebody, and others. Our teachers, writers, and readers develop a critical literacy toolkit to break the code, make meaning, identify purpose, and critically analyze text. They learn to ask questions of text, such as whose voices are being heard, whose voices are absent, what do I have to say, how can I be heard, what impact can I have on my community and on social change. Additionally, in teacher education and in our doctoral program at USF, educators learn to resist commonplace deficit perspectives that historically and culturally and educationally define and label students by what they lack related to race, disability, and other stigmatized social markers. Instead, we ask them to redefine literacy, or rather literacies, in ways that see and leverage student capacities. So this is a nice quote from one of our teachers. Kay's attitude and energy were not those of a kid who had been told that he can't read, can't behave, can't be part of a group. Rather, one of a child who felt like he could put some authentic energy into being a productive part of a team. He didn't express it in words, but it was evident in the way he held his head high today, listened when we spoke, and tried his best to be patient. So that was during the book project. By the end of the project, teachers changed their definition of literacy from reading and writing text to a broader concept, which included applying it in the real world, drawing pictures through body language, hand gestures, and singing a song. So here you can see some of our author readings. So again, 2nd through 10th graders read their books aloud to first graders and kindergartners in their community. And finally, XJP has allowed me to begin to get some of the books that I want for my children and all children. So this is, again, my daughter Una on the left, getting to meet Maya Garcia, author of Maya's Ballet, and get her book signed. And so Maya is like a celebrity to Una. So as you can see, XJP has been fun and rewarding, but a huge undertaking. And 1,000 thank yous to our authors, students, David Pearson, Jose Lizarraga, Christine Trost, and especially the Yamashita's family, whose encouragement makes it possible to continue our work in the mission and spirit of the Thomas Yamashita Prize to alter and transform the social landscape for the purpose of creating a more just and equitable world. And so I'll turn it over to Arturo.
Wow. Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to strawberry fields. There's a tremendous amount of labor and learning in the production of a delicious, mouth-watering strawberry. All the food that we eat is the manifestation of labor and learning. Not only did my grandmother, a picker, feed me, she helped feed countless families. And just like that, a story begins. From the moments of the first fire as humans heated food, they nourished more than their bellies. Around the hearth, they shared their successes, their origins, their stories. These are examples of what Professor Michael Cole calls our cultural inheritance. Indeed, stories travel across time and space and are ingrained into the dreamscapes and the very architecture of our existence. Stories, they're our lifeblood. And so in this respect, our project was about learning how young people read and write the world. Certainly, we wanted to build on and amplify their cultural inheritance, while also making links to academic disciplinary knowledge. To help the young people do this, we simply asked them to do one thing: play. Vygotsky reminds us that play is a leading human activity. It's a rich zone of learning, where we can stretch our imaginations and overcome constraints. Play is a fertile ground for resistance work. It's also a site where young people can historicize and learn a dilemma's history and why it has such salience in their lives. The process of writing books became an opportunity for young people to share how they overcame dilemmas. We fundamentally believe, following Professor Chris Gutierrez, that within the ordinary, there are extraordinary moments of learning happening. We center equity in our work, and I really want to be clear about what I mean by equity. Equity is about social transformation. We believe that teachers are cultural workers, to appropriate Balafrede here, and that they should leverage and build on young people's cultural tools, their inheritance, to chart new futures where dilemmas are overcome. In this sense, following the work of the Prolepsis Design Studio, a research group that I'm a part of here on campus, we think that it's imperative to see learning anew and to design for its expansive potential and social transformation. Now, this affects all of us because any change in human activity is a pedagogical exploration. Any change in human activity is a pedagogical exploration. Now, Professor Chris Gutierrez, my advisor, whose labor and learning deeply inspired this project, argues that knowledge is an action. Learning, in our view, takes on a new valence when equity is at the center. Learning is about doing, and we've designed for teachers and young people to engage in new ways of doing, new ways of taking action. Young people taught teachers new practices in the process of reading and writing. So, for example, upon meeting, teachers and young people initially sat at tables. They sat around tables, brainstorming, and using a pen and paper to write. Of course, after a few minutes, young people began to refuse this process of writing. Now, they wanted to play, and it was in play that the ideas for their stories emerged, that dilemmas emerged. And their refusal to participate in writing in that way was very generative, because it showed teachers that there are multiple ways of reading and writing a story. Now, together they developed narratives in their actions. And remember, knowledge comes from action. So where do we go from here? As we've shared, the project has taken on a life of its own in the work of teachers, but most importantly, XJP has provided young people with new practices as they make movement toward justice and hope in their everyday lives. However, I personally, I'm still vexed by equity. I sometimes find equity difficult to imagine. I'm especially given our troubling times. I would argue that we have never known times without trouble. Our country's history is built on destruction and domination. The annihilation of the first people on this land and the enslavement of black people are written on the walls of this very building. They're embedded in the oxygen we breathe. They're echoed throughout our homes across the wide expanse of time and space. If we want to get real about equity, how far back must we historicize the dilemmas that we currently face right now in this room? Our trouble began long before January 20th, 2017. Please know that hope is at the forefront of my practice. James Baldwin reminds us, I can't be a pessimist because I am alive. What stories will we tell that build on our cultural inheritance? How will we help young people, specifically those who are from non-dominant communities, transform their lives? That is our objective now. I urge you to consider what story you will tell about domination today and how we are chipping away at it through our resistance. the revolution, it continues with us in this room. While I love allies, I think we need accomplices in the trenches. Thank you to the selection committee, to Nicola, to David, to Jose, to the thinkers in this room who've inspired this project. Thank you. To the teachers who trusted us and worked tirelessly with us on this project, but most importantly to the Prince Hall Learning Center and the young people who shared their stories with us, shared their view of the world. This really is for them. Strawberry Fields forever.
Every year when we do the selection, it's really hard to distinguish who wins and there's always a cluster which are just really, really close. And so every year we don't never intend to, but we always end up with a runner-up. And so believe me, the runner-up isn't a runner-up. It ends up being it's always incredibly challenging. So, but we always feel that it's important it's really important to recognize other people. And so I would like to call up Camila, Cribb, Fabersunne, and her work. And again, she.
I didn't know to call this.
No, thank you. No. There's this, and then there's. Congratulations. What? Yeah, what? I'll hold it when you speak.
Okay. Thank you so much. Sorry if I jumped the gun and came up early. Thank you so much for this incredible honor. My name is Camila, and I'm a resident physician in pediatrics at UCSF. I'm here today because of a project I've been working on with the support of some amazing community members, some of who are here today, who are all interested in demolishing the school-to-prison pipeline. Let me start by telling you a story of one of my patients. I'll call her Amelia. I first met Amelia when she was 2 years old in our clinic at the Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital. She first came to clinic with her mother because of a lazy eye. I prescribed glasses and followed her closely to make sure her vision improved. However, her mother was battling psychotic episodes. These episodes eventually became so severe that she was unable to continue caring for Amelia. A year later, now 3-year-old Amelia, who was under the care of her grandparents, she returned in her cute pink glasses for a general checkup. I was horrified to hear, however, that Amelia had not been attending preschool that week because she had been suspended for misbehavior. She had kicked a wall and smeared her diaper on the floor. How could this precious little one, at only 3 years old, be punished for acting out in this way? Certainly the confusion of living in multiple homes, much less consistency needed, with a parent who could provide the consistency needed for her toddler development, had contributed to her actions. But what about implicit bias? Did the teachers interpret her behavior as ingrained misbehavior? Like the systems that have set up mass incarceration of men of color in this country, our schools' punitive practices to perpetuate racism. We know that about 3.5 million young people are suspended in the United States every year. 5% will have been suspended by adulthood, but white students will have been suspended by adulthood, but black and brown youth are suspended 3 times more often than whites. And it's well known that suspension puts youth at risk for school failure and incarceration. The racial disparity affecting my patients, like Amelia, must be addressed. My passion is keeping young people well. I love the field of pediatrics because it is a perfect nexus between medicine and public health. Pediatricians partner with parents and young people to navigate a complex world, holding human development and wellness in the highest regard. In studying public health, I learned to look even further upstream to keep populations healthy from environmental, economic, and societal hardships. The school-to-prison pipeline must be seen as one of these hardships that affect specific populations. I've had to look outside of the world of medicine, however, for funding and mentorship to think about the effects of early childhood trauma of punitive school discipline. I'm grateful that I've been able to learn from community organizations like Roadmap to Peace, a part of Instituto de la Raza Familiar, led by Doctora Angela Gallegos Castillo, another alum, it sounds like, of Berkeley, who's here today. I've looked to her and her organization for perspectives, knowledge, ideas, and energy. Together, we have embarked upon a research project hoping to answer the question, what is the full profile of those suspended and expelled students in San Francisco beyond just the race, ethnicity, disability, health status, home environment? We hope by answering this question and eventually connecting educational outcomes with health outcomes, we can build resources that match the kinds of students, teachers, and classrooms that are most often affected. This question, however, is not easily answered. San Francisco's Department of Public Health and its Unified School District are interested in the connection between discipline, school achievement, and health as well. Together, we've been working to mobilize data that can link our areas of expertise to answer the research question I posed. Despite the logistical challenges of working with proprietary health information and education information, our passion and our values are aligned. We all want to understand fully the impact of school discipline on health, morbidity, and mortality. We are committed to studying the school-to-prison pipeline through a public health lens. I want to acknowledge my colleagues. I am always invigorated when I meet with Dr. Angela from Roadmap to Peace, Drs. Curtis Chan and Jody Stuckey from the Department of Public Health in San Francisco, and our connections to SFUSD, Devin Corrigan, Dr. Norma Ming, and Thomas Graven. And finally, to my methodologic mentor, Dr. Megan Morris from the Department of Epidemiology. Thank you each for your time, your brilliant minds, and your commitment to education and health equity. Finally, I want to reemphasize how honored I am to be here today and how very grateful I am for the funding of the Yamashita Prize, honorable mention. It's the first seed funding our project has gained, and I'm just very grateful. So thank you all, and thank you guys.
Now it's my pleasure to call forward David Kirp, who was previously James D. Marver Professor at the Goldman School of Public Policy and is currently Professor of the Graduate School. And as you know, David Kirp is the founder and benefactor to Kids First Prize, and he will come forward and introduce not only the prize and the reasons for it, but also the recipient of it. So David, would you please come forward?
What a pleasure to be here on what a wonderful occasion. I want to tell you a story. It seems to be a theme that cuts across all of our prizes. It's the story of Angel, who I met a couple of weeks ago when I was in Orlando visiting the University of Central Florida and Valencia College, two of the most innovative higher education institutions in the country. So Angel, as he told a story to me, grew up in the barrio in Miami. He was a troublemaker from the start. He was a gang member. He was in juvie. He was in jail, and then he was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to an 11-year prison term. So for him, prison was an occasion to reflect on what his life had been and what his life could be. He started educating himself, and he was a smart guy. Earned a GED while he was in prison, was released early for good behavior, and he writes a letter to Valencia Community College in Orlando. Why Orlando? Because he doesn't want to be back in Miami with the old guys, but he doesn't want to be that far from his mother, who is a drug addict and in and out of mental hospitals, and is his mother, and he wants to stay connected to her. So he writes a letter on prison stationery to Valencia College, having no idea what their response is going to be. And Valencia says, come on down. And he does. He has no money. Catholic Charities runs a homeless center, and he lives there. He lives there for the entire time he is in Orlando, still living there. And one of the lesser known facts that is that a not insubstantial number of students wind up homeless during the time that they're in college. At Valencia, then the story really takes off. He blossoms. He just devours learning. He has a 4.0 average. He becomes an advocate for homeless students. Florida, amazingly, has legislation which allows homeless students to go to university free. When Jill Biden comes to give a talk at Valencia, he promotes that idea. He transfers to the University of Central Florida. 50 years old, 65,000 students, average student 4.0 GPA, a place that you may never have heard of, but that has done remarkable things in a short time. There he does many, many things. He winds up with an internship in the state legislature. He winds up spending a summer clerking for a judge. And now he wants to be a lawyer who really can fight for the issues that have become part of his life, fight for youth. And he will be entering University of Washington this fall. Those are the stories that keep those of us who are in this line of endeavor, this vocation, going. And it's the promise of education, it's the promise of activities that support youth to bend the arc of the lives of children and youth. So I have a very simple mantra. Every child deserves what you'd want for a child you love. Every child deserves what you'd want for a child you love. And that really has guided me in a lifetime spent trying to make equal opportunity a reality, both in writing and in advising folks and in being on the ground and tutoring and hanging out in a poor urban school district in New Jersey where I was Mr. David to a bunch of third graders who were learning English, learning America, prepping for that horrid first high-stakes test. I think the biggest accomplishment in some ways that I can report shows the depth of policy analysis that I engaged in. I was on the transition team. Transition teams usually write white papers that get ignored by the secretaries who show up because they've got their own agenda. But lo and behold, this time there was going to be $1 trillion stimulus budget. So everybody, as you will remember, right? As Chris will remember, everybody turned their attention to focusing on making something good happen. I crossed out the 1 in the additional funds for early Head Start, substituted 2. That was it. That was the analysis, and so $1 billion more went to little kids. So I've been lucky enough to teach at Berkeley. The public policy students that I've known continue to have an enormous impact on the state and the nation and the cities of the Bay Area. Their efforts and the efforts of undergraduates have really gone mostly undersung, under the radar, until now. And that's why I established the Kids First Prize, to shine a light on this great work. The prize really is focused on undergraduates who during their time at Berkeley have developed innovative strategies to increase opportunities for children and youth. It's the first time the prize has been awarded. I'm really jazzed. The applications came from across the campus. It's very hard to make selections. But as you'll soon hear, the 2 students who share this year's prize exemplify Berkeley at its best. They're smart, they're out-of-the-box thinkers, they're hardworking, they're passionate. The Kids First Prize is meant as an acknowledgement of all that they have done and all that they will continue to do. So with that, let me introduce the first of the 2 prize winners, Dylan Bush. So Dylan, you can spend 1 second. Rush the gun here. I got to say something about you. Dylan's efforts to help better the lives of Latino immigrants, adults and youth, began when he was a freshman. His work embodies the values of the Kids First Prize. In the fall of 2015, he founded Domingo de Desarrollo Development Sunday for elementary and middle school kids in Oakland, East Oakland. Now, as you know, Latino kids have a passion for soccer, and that was a point of that at which contact could be. He could make contact with these kids. The organization took the sort of scattered soccer games and built a soccer league in East Oakland. And it wasn't just a soccer league, it became an occasion for a community meal and for lessons developed by Berkeley undergraduates, focusing on everything from good eating habits to bullying in the schools. Something over 300 community members have been involved in that enterprise since it began, and it goes on. I'm delighted to present the Kids First Prize to Dylan Bush. Dylan.
Don't know if they make these big enough for me. Hello, and thank you all so much for coming. I feel very honored to be in this space today with all of you. And I want to start off with a brief story that's very personal to me. It's a story about a man in the early 1900s, nearly a decade before the Nazis would take power in Germany, but nonetheless a very dangerous time for Jews in Eastern Europe. Now, this man left Europe with the hopes of coming to the United States, but as many are told, he was told, there's no more room for people like you. This man ended up finding a place that did accept him, and that was Mexico, and this man also happens to be my great-great-uncle. Growing up, my grandmother would tell me stories about his journey, and she would also share with me stories from her own childhood, remembering packing boxes with jars of jam, bags of flour, and boxes of sugar to send to the concentration camps like Dachau and Auschwitz to family members who would perish. In addition to all of this, I had the great privilege as a child of being raised by an immigrant woman from Nayarit because both my parents worked full-time. Her name is Xochitl, and she is a mother to me. Because of my upbringing and my family history, I have always been interested in narratives of migration and how they interact with narratives of survival. And so it was quite natural for me, as Dr. Kirp mentioned, to get involved with the Youth Empowerment Program as a freshman, which then focused on mentoring detained youth in a facility that very few people know about, 45 minutes northeast of here, called BCFS in Fairfield. But when there was a change in federal policy, we had to act fast because we were barred from the facility and yet faced extinction. I worked with our co-coordinator, Gabby Perez, and the Latino community itself to build a new program that worked around soccer as a contact point and built out from there. And it is called the Domingo de Desarrollo Program, or Development Sunday. Through this program, we have held a workshop with the Kumuhina Foundation, during which we talked about ending bullying and respecting LGBTQ youth in schools. We have planted corn with the youth and had the chance to talk about the indigenous pride of having corn that comes from the Americas. And we have done so much more. When I hear people ask me, how is your program successful? What do you do? The simple answer is that we really don't. The reason for our program's success lies squarely in the community. Many organizations might begin discussing their work around talking about what is wrong with the community, but today I want to suggest that we start talking about what is right. To give you an example of how true community partnership might look, the other day I attended the first Domingo Desarrollo of our summer cycle, and as I arrived greeting the kids and the parents who I've gotten to know over the past 2 years, I found the stern face of a mother. She looked at me frowning, glanced at her watch, and said, "Uy, no, Dylan, llegas es muy tarde." She was reprimanding me for having arrived late. That's exactly the kind of relationships that we should be striving to build in the community, relationships in which we are held accountable, in addition to community members holding themselves accountable as well. And between YEP and the community, there really is no border. We have purposely worked to dull the border because, let's face it, there's just too many borders in our current society. When we receive funding, we ask the community how they want to spend it. When we have an idea, we ask the community if they think it will work. And most importantly, before we ever began this program, we asked the community if they even wanted our support through surveys and interviews. Let me stress that this model and this work is not an easy one to follow. We must make ourselves accountable and available every step of the way, and when our youth needed tutoring because there was no more room in the Oakland Public School after school tutoring program, we stepped up and offered to go ourselves to their homes every week to tutor with them for at least an hour. When I got a call on Thursday of Dead Week, this past Thursday, from a parent who needed a U visa for her husband, needed a U visa letter of recommendation for her husband, I couldn't tell her, just wait, next week I'll have more time. Because that's not how it works. This is a type of work that must never end because the needs and the requests of the community are infinite, are meaningful, and are important. I'm inspired by the strength of these families who live in constant fear of immigration raids, but who act in bravery every single day to attend community events and classes to empower their children. I was inspired when we saw 25 people for our event called the Young Scientist Training Day at Novartis Institute for Biomedical Research in Emeryville, and showed up at the meeting point to find 40 youth and parents waiting for us. I was inspired when I worked with the LEAP program from Stanford to run diabetes and heart health workshops, and after the workshops, parents came up to me. I stopped buying soda. We try not to buy fried foods anymore. These people inspire me every single day because they are brave, they are resilient, and because contrary to popular rhetoric, they are deeply invested in the future of our youth and of their communities. YEP serves as a living testament to the fact that when we begin to see the community as a source of power instead of a set of issues, when we begin to involve parents in the programming, we can begin to create sustainable change. And I hope that our model and our message can be implemented across the country and across the world, keeping in mind that every community is different, and our model is really as simple as placing decisions in the community's hands. I have so many people to thank for this, and I want to thank firstly Dr. Kirp, Dr. Lustig, Dr. Trust, and everyone who made this event possible. I want to thank Xochitl, gracias por cuidarme como si fuera de su sangre y por siempre ser tan fuerte. Thank you to the SAGE Scholars Program, Chris Bennett, Lily Omid, Sandra Messick, for giving me the skills to make my dreams a reality. Thank you to Professor Nadia Ellis for challenging my notions of race and space. Thank you to Professor Elena Schneider for believing in me and convincing me that even undergraduates are scholars who contribute to academia and their communities. Thank you to Professor Yvonne Del Valle for being a friend and a mentor in addition to a teacher. Thank you to Dr. John Matsui for creating a program that I have called home for the past 4 years. Thank you to Ms. Marcella Anthony from Stanford LEAP program for inspiring me every single LEAP session and for convincing me that we have the power to make sustainable change. Thank you to my parents, Greg and Jill, for always loving me and being proud of me. And thank you to my partner, Adrian Garcia Hernandez, for always being by my side, for loving me and supporting me, even when my work has meant being away from home late at night and busy during all hours of the day. To all of you, thank you.
So this is why it's so exciting to be able to call forth the amazing things that Berkeley undergraduates do. It's just astonishing. So I want to introduce Ankita Joshi, who also embodies the values of the Kids First Prize. Like Dylan, her passion is to support urban youth. She is an engineering major, and she took a very different approach, providing high school students with STEAM, that is science, technology, engineering, art, and math tutoring, as well as 3D design skills. Her social venture, which she launched last year, relies on Berkeley undergraduates to train students who then get experience with real-world projects in partnership with Berkeley tech startups. Last semester, the organization pioneered the program at Oakland Technical High. The pilot was a success. Plans to expand the program are underway. I'm delighted to award the Kids First Prize to Ankita, Joshi.
Hello everyone, thank you Dr. Kirp for this prize and everyone for organizing this amazing event today and giving us a platform to share our work and hear from all of the other winners. So my name is Ankita Joshi and I am a senior studying mechanical engineering over here. I'm also one of the founders of MAKE, which is a social enterprise that provides STEAM and 3D design skills to urban youth in the Bay Area. So let me tell you a little bit more about my background and then why I started this organization. So I come from a really small town in Tennessee where I did not have a lot of STEM or engineering classes in high school. But my parents were engineers, so I knew what the field is, and that kind of pushed me to come to college being an engineering major. But when I came over here, I kind of saw that I was missing out on so much because I did not have that background in high school. So many of my peers who are from the Bay Area and who have really rigorous STEM programs in high school, they kind of have a head start on the college career from early on. So they come here being very, very prepared, whereas the people who do not have that background are in a way left behind, and that's kind of what I felt. So as a freshman, I enrolled in, I sent a lot of emails and luckily found a lab in the bioengineering department that gave me the opportunity to start researching as a freshman. And that really made a difference to how I studied in all of the rest of my classes. Everything that I was learning in lectures and reading in my textbooks just made a lot more sense when I got to do it hands-on. So the two things that I learned a lot was that I really need something hands-on to make more sense of what I'm learning in my classes, and this opportunity should have come in my life a lot earlier in high school so that I was more prepared for the rigorous academics that the university has to provide. So although I had this background, I didn't really do much about it until I met my co-founders Michelle Nee and Aubrey Larson at a social entrepreneurship class that I took at Haas 1 year ago. So in that class, we had to come up with a social enterprise or work for one. And so we all really bonded over the idea that marketable skills and access to lasting income will be a way to solve a lot of issues that are related to poverty. So if people have jobs and skills, they will be able to make income and better prepare for their situations. So we started thinking about what can we do with this mindset and all the capacity that we have at UC Berkeley. The more research we did, we realized that Oakland and Berkeley is one of our ranked highest in the United States for cities that have disparities in terms of student background and what major they choose in college or as their career. So basically, minorities are not going into STEM or STEAM related jobs as compared to other people. So having that in mind, we crafted a program that teaches hardware and 3D design skills to urban youth. And we also connect them to internship and job opportunities by startups started off with the Berkeley area, by the Berkeley students in the Berkeley area. That way it's easier for them to come over here and also practice hands-on skills and also get income. So currently, we ran a pilot last year from August 2016 to December 2016 at the Art Academy of Oakland Tech, where there's not a lot of science or math classes offered currently. And we saw a lot of good feedback coming out of these students over here in terms of the work that they've done and also the interest that they've then showed in incorporating technology in their careers. From there, we have grown our program to not only teach 3D design and fabrication, but also teach design strategy. So once we teach how you make something, you think about what are the principles and design strategies that go into it to make it better. We are now building a makerspace at Oakland Public Library, which we are hoping will start by August of 2017. So that is open to all the students when the school starts, and not only students, but also adults who have access to that makerspace. In addition to that, we are currently registering as a nonprofit so that we can grow our organization, license our curriculum that currently focuses on fabrication and design strategy, and we are growing that a lot more to not only provide it to high schools, but also middle and elementary schools in the future. So with all that, I'm really excited for what the organization has to offer and how it will grow in the future. And we have had a lot of amazing support from professors in the mechanical engineering department, mainly Alice Agogino, who has been my mentor throughout college, and also Professor Oliver O'Reilly, who has taught us a lot in terms of how to teach properly to students in middle school and high school ages. In addition to that, I would like to thank everyone in my team and all Professor Kirp and his team for giving us this opportunity and believing in our project. Thank you.
Wow. So I thought, I was asked about who might be a keynote speaker, who might put this event in some context, some perspective. My dream answer was Pedro Noguera. And it really is an honor and a joy to introduce my friend and colleague. I really appreciate his coming to campus, flying up from Los Angeles for this event. Because more than anybody that I know, he embodies the ethos and the values of the Kids First Prize. I've known Pedro since the 1990s when he was a Berkeley professor, an outstanding Berkeley professor, won the Distinguished Teaching Award while he was here. Also was on the Berkeley School Board while he was here. He left us for Harvard, which many of us said was a bad idea. He figured that out soon enough, went to NYU, decided that California called, so he went to UCLA. Maybe he wishes he never left Berkeley. I've never asked him that question. Pedro is a remarkable scholar. He's published more than 200 articles, monographs, and research reports. 200, right? I barely read 200 reports. Because of a substantial body of scholarship, he was elected to the prestigious National Academy of Education, and he has received 6 honorary doctorates. Throughout his career, Pedro has been an ardent and passionate champion of equity. The title of one of his books encapsulates the aspiration, Closing the Achievement Gap in Our Nation's Schools. So, as Jews might say, Dayenu, that would have been enough, but it's not. Because Pedro's influence reaches far beyond academia. He has brought the insights of research to on-the-ground education reform. Regular appearances on national media, including CNN, National Public Radio. He has worked closely wherever he's been with states, school districts, community groups, promoting initiatives to make equality of education opportunity a reality. That's why he was recently named as one of the top scholars who are doing the most to influence education policy and practice. In short, for undergraduates, Berkeley students like today's prize winners, whose ambition is to bend the arc of children's lives, there is no better role model I can think of than Pedro Noguera. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. It is a true honor to be here, and just want to say that it's to be able to participate in this event and acknowledge the work of these individuals who are getting these awards, and of the individuals for whom these awards are named and from their coming, including David Kirp and Thomas Yamashita. It is, I think it's special, given the moment we're in, of a Bush president, and not a Bush. I wish. Who would have thought that, right? A Trump presidency. And so what I'd like to do is to kind of frame my remarks around the moment we're in, because as important as it is to acknowledge the work that we see in each of these awardees, it's also important to recognize what we're up against at this time. Now, having practically grown up here on this campus, I can't help but be nostalgic. And so the first thing I thought of as I was coming here, well, I thought of two things. 32 years ago, I was elected student body president at Berkeley, almost to the day, right, in April. In fact, my second daughter was born just a few days before that election. And what was significant about that is that it occurred just as the anti-apartheid movement was coming to full bloom. And as we were approaching this building, I thought of the fact that there was a meeting of the Academic Senate, the system-wide Academic Senate, that took place in this room right over here. And David Kirp was there to talk about UC's investments, because we'd made an issue of it, and so he was there, and I and several others came unannounced to their meeting, which was unheard of, because students never came to those meetings. And President Gardner was quite flustered, wasn't sure what to do, and we asked if we could speak, which wasn't allowed, but they said okay. And we proceeded to say why they should, as a group, vote to support the disinvestment of federal funds that the university had in corporations that were in South Africa. And police arrived shortly after we made our statement, and then we left without any melee of any kind. And shortly after they did, they voted to support our resolution to divest. And what's so significant about that is Ronald Reagan had just been elected to a second term. He had just vetoed a sanctions resolution in Congress, which then got overturned by the Congress because a movement was growing throughout the country calling for disinvestment. And Berkeley was at the epitome of that movement. It was, and what was significant was it wasn't simply, and I got to say this on this campus now, it wasn't simply about protest. It was about organizing. It was about organizing with groups and constituencies, including very senior faculty, including the Board of Regents, including workers on campus, including clergy, because we knew that it wasn't just going to be a small group of radicals who could get this to happen. We had to sway public opinion. And we won. Wow, how often can you say that? Right? Now, the story of how we won is also interesting, because who'd have thought that George Deukmejian would have delivered it for us? That's yet again another story. But I would say that I find in this moment of a Trump presidency, where every day is something new, and even every hour, as we know now, coming from this administration, it's easy to get very pessimistic and to think that there's things that just totally falling apart, can't get worse. And for those who are old enough to remember the Reagan era, I felt like that a lot of the time when Reagan was president. And I often remind people it's not just the president to worry about; it's all the people they appoint and the work that goes on in that administration. And so the question I want to pose today, and I think it's apt given the work we've heard about already from these awardees, is what's our responsibility as students and scholars and researchers in this period in addressing the various crises facing our society and the world. And when you think about the enormity of those crises, the enormity of the problems we face, it is overwhelming. So much so that it's tempting to simply just tune it out, isn't it? Right? And hope that if we don't think about it long enough, if we distract ourselves with the playoffs, which I try to do occasionally, right, that maybe it won't be so bad, but then we get these images, right? Because we are in a perpetual state of war throughout the world now. Right? Literally on several continents simultaneously, the United States is engaged in combat. Often I was trying to explain to a group of students and of course I'm teaching now, why is it that there's no anti-war movement right now? When we're in the middle of war. And I think part of it is because, unlike during the Vietnam era, when many Americans felt very directly connected to the war, we have a poverty draft now. Who serves? It's largely poor and working class people. And so unless you feel some direct connection, then the war seems like a remote, it's almost like another episode on TV you can turn off if you don't like reality TV. But then again, we get these other images that are so disturbing. It's like, wow. Children washing up on shores. This is literally happening right now. Right? Over 1 billion refugees over the next 10 years, what's projected. And we can again want to turn the channel, but it doesn't mean it goes away. Because as we know, these problems are just getting worse. And every day is some new atrocity. And so when the atrocities come to us in the form of people trying to get across the border, it is understandable. Someone say, no, keep them out. Build a damn wall. And all you have to do is realize as soon as you leave the cities, the call to build the wall does indeed resonate throughout America. It's not about red and blue states, it's about urban versus rural, it's about lots of things. It's about fear. And that fear leads to some of the most inhumane treatment we're seeing anywhere in the world, right here in this country, where literally thousands of people right now are incarcerated for the crime of coming to this country without papers. And I don't just mean adults, I mean children, whole families of people, behind bars almost indefinitely. I was visiting a school in juvenile halls back in January for girls. And you should know that most of the girls in juvenile hall are themselves victims of some form of abuse, sex trafficking, and the like. And I was there to look at the education that they were receiving and what they were doing in their classes, and met a young woman who had the name of a man tattooed across her face. And I asked her about it. She said it was an ex-boyfriend. They told me, no, that's what the pimps do, is they mark their names on their faces to treat them as property. And I asked her, I said, explain your project, and she was doing a project about this very train they call the Beast, which transports many of these so-called unaccompanied minors from Central America north. And I said, well, you know, with Trump elected, it probably won't be that many coming anymore. She said, well, why doesn't Trump help us not have to come? Because a lot of us would rather be at home than be here. How come they're not talking about that? And it struck me because our ability to imagine solutions to the problems we face, whether it be immigration or whether it be global warming, we are living at a time where, you know, it's become increasingly difficult to imagine that optimism, to go back to the quote we heard from James Baldwin, is something that we can realistically hold on. That is concrete optimism, not naive optimism. And so I think despite how depressing it might be, we can't help but think about the political moment we're in. Now, many of us are happy that France did a good thing this Sunday and didn't follow the rightward trend, but we know that that movement is alive and well throughout Western Europe. And it's alive and well in this country too. That is, the election of Trump has given rise to a hatred that many of us thought was in our past, but now is quite out in the open. And while the names might change, they don't call themselves neo-Nazis, they just call them the alt-right. The fact is that the face of this movement is our president. And so the question becomes, what do we do? How do we respond? What's our responsibility as privileged people in nice universities in this moment? Can we go on like business as usual, or do we have something else we've got to do? Now, the truth is that even before Trump's election, we were not exactly doing great. Right? Right? Inequality was growing, poverty rates had risen and hadn't receded. You know, the area not far from where I live in Los Angeles had higher foreclosure rates than any community in the country, the so-called Inland Empire. Right? Now has some of the highest homicide rates in the country. This was pre-Trump. And so I think it's a mistake to just say this is all about Trump. It's not as though things were fine under Obama. And so, as this quote from Joseph Stiglitz, the economist, reminds us, this moment we're in of deeply entrenched inequality, the United States is now the most unequal country in the world amongst advanced industrialized countries. It's as great a threat to our future as global warming and war. And it shows up in so many different ways. It shows up not just in the educational disparities that David has written about so eloquently. It shows up in the large number of people living on our streets, many of whom are mentally ill. And so, while historically we've seen schools can solve all this, it's pretty clear that schools can't do this work. Schools are not up to the task, particularly not when they're saddled with the kinds of challenges they're faced and the kinds of policies that we've created that have teachers much more focused on preparing kids for tests than preparing them for life, and much more concerned about how to be in compliance with the latest federal or state regulations than how to make a difference and break the cycle of poverty in our schools. And so we're going to have to start, I think, asking different questions. And to me, the questions we should be asking is, how do we use education as a resource at this time to counter the xenophobia, the fear, the hopelessness that's generated both by the enormity of the problems we face as well as by the reaction to them. Now, I think each of the examples that we've heard today should give you reason to be somewhat hopeful. Because what they share in common is that they weren't waiting for permission. They weren't waiting for someone to tell them what to do. They, on their own, decided we can take action where we are now to do something. And even if it's small, it's something. And that should, I think, be a source of inspiration for all of us about what we can do. Because what is important about a day like today, and recognizing individuals like those we've recognized, is to know that there is something that's possible even during these bleak moments. I was visiting Robben Island when I got to visit South Africa a couple years ago. And Robben Island, as some of you know, was the maximum security prison that was created by the South African government to destroy all of those who resisted apartheid. Nelson Mandela spent over 20 years of his life there, 7 of which he spent in solitary confinement. I was given a tour of the prison by a former inmate who served time with Mandela. Got to go to the cell where Mandela was held. They explained what life was like behind bars at Robben Island, and they said, the government thought this was going to destroy us. He said, Robben Island became known as our university. I said, really? I said, how did a prison become a university? He said, because this is where many of us got our education. And we educated each other, and guards who we won over smuggled in books and reading material for us. Mandela converted his guard to smuggle in information by providing free legal service to his family. An Afrikaner guard. Think about that now. Next time you don't want to talk to your uncle Thanksgiving because he voted for Trump. If you could turn a prison into a university, what can you do with a university? That's already supposed to be a hotbed of good ideas. So I think that in some ways we are it's very easy at this moment to allow ourselves to just feel smaller than we actually are, right? And to not recognize the enormous potential that there is for change at multiple levels and in multiple areas. I am struck by what this particular moment is teaching us about politics, about power. The fact that Trump could get away with literally bullying the entire Republican field, the media, anybody he comes across. And this is the way he does business. What message does that send to kids about bullies, about harassment, about abusing others? I am equally concerned about the ways in which lying has just taken off as being yet another part of the political process. And it doesn't matter what you say. And it doesn't matter what fact checkers find. You can dismiss them all as fake news. And given that the news is just chattering 24 hours a day, after a while it all sounds fake, because you can get lost in the chatter. And I am concerned because I don't believe our schools are doing a very good job right now of preparing young people to participate in a democracy and to think critically about what it means to be a citizen, to be a member of the society, to vote. And so I think there's a lot of work to do. You know, like many of you here today, I've chosen to do my work in education because I think it's so critical. David mentioned that I was elected to the school board, something I quickly came to regret here in Berkeley. About a month after, I realized this was not a good idea. But that's when I actually encountered David's work, was reading Just Schools, reading about the history of Berkeley and the ways in which race and politics had come together to prevent this very liberal community from figuring out how to educate its kids. What impresses me so much about David's work, and the reason why it was so easy for me to accept this invitation, is that he's committed himself over the last several years to shining the light on what is possible right now. And what can we learn from places like Union City? Right? And why it's in our interest to make sure that preschool is available to all kids. And doing that not just in books, but in the New York Times when they let them get an op-ed in, and making sure that during a period when it's rhetoric and ideology that seems to cloud the thinking, that we still have ideas that are rooted in reality, that we can say, no, look, learn from this. It's real. He told me about his new book, focusing on colleges and what they're doing, or not doing, to address the huge disparities in our society. And so when I got this invitation, I said, if I'm available, I'm coming, because I appreciate what Kids First, what David Kirp's work has meant and does mean now at this time. I didn't know as much about Thomas Yamashita. I knew Bob, because we hung out together at the Institute for many years. Troy was very gracious to allow us to occupy space, and so I asked Bob for more information about his father. One of the things that we haven't heard today is that he served in the armed forces while his parents were interned, right? Like many Japanese Americans. And he also found ways as an engineer to not just do great work as an engineer in Hong Kong and elsewhere, but to also take care of the people who worked for him. So he was admired as an employer, as a manager. And so although his work doesn't seem like the kind of work that lends itself to thinking about social change, in his own way, he was. Because he was not allowing the moment, right, a moment when Japanese Americans were viewed as pariahs in this country, to thwart him and prevent him from living up to his potential. And so I want to leave you with this. I don't think we have to wait for the next election to begin thinking about change. I think the individuals we've recognized today show us that there's a lot that's possible right now. And I think the greatest fear of Trump and all the Trumpeteers out there is not that he won't win again, but that he won't get anything done because he will have energized an array of people in this country who not just resist, but who are willing to act to create alternatives to this dystopian future that they have in store for us. And so I would say, if these awards are truly to mean something, beyond the $2,500 you got, it's going to be felt in the inspiration that the rest of us get from the work you're doing. You all are I think, epitomizing the possibilities of the moment that we're in. And for that, I am honored to be a part of this event, and I congratulate each of you for the important work you're doing. Thank you.
It was very difficult to follow that, as you all know, and I think everyone who spoke today, those who presented the prizes, as well as those who were recipients of the prizes, as well as Pedro, gave us enough inspiration to go forward. I think the fear that all of us have, including myself, is that these events are like all types of events that they stimulate you, but each one who won this award knows that it's not the stimulus that actually wins. It's the dogged behavior that is required every day to go out there and work and work and work. And that's harder. And so for all the recipients, thank you for that dogged work. Pedro, thank you for the work over the years. And there are many in this audience who also have done this work that I know of. And I thank all of you. And hopefully this will be enough for me to start the dogged path myself each and every day. Now I want to thank again everybody who was a part of this, including the audience, and also invite you, and please stay, because lots of wonderful conversations come as we have the social hour, which is some wine and cheese. So thank you again, and I look forward to seeing all of you next year with another set of recipients worthy of this prize. So, thank you.